Hey there, and welcome to my review of Sputnik Sweetheart, or Sputnik Sweetheart. So, you might be wondering why you should read this book, or what makes this book great. And I personally like to think that what's great about this book is unspeakable. The book is what I believe to be an emotional tour de force of human emotions. And this tour de force cannot really be vocalized. The book is about characters pulling and pushing each other. The characters are in a constant sort of parallel love triangle. You could kind of think of it as this, or you could think about it as this sort of triangle. Right? These characters are destined never to connect, or the triangle is never destined to connect. Sort of like it as though these corners of the triangle are erased. The lines remain without the bent intersections, suspended in air. And that's kind of how love works in this book. Another way we could think about it is the three characters in this novel come together from three different parts and then split apart. Or, as I'll describe it later on, one character goes to another character and then into her own place, in a way. So, all of these sort of metaphor images I'm using them to describe the type of love in this book. We call this unrequited love. As we read the book, we learn that one character has affection for the second, who has affection for the third, and the third has kind of an affection for the first. That is, Kei likes Sumire, and Sumire likes Miu, and Miu likes Kei, but they can never reciprocate their love physically. The love continuously reflects from one person to the next, as though the characters were mirrors. And that is what makes this book beautiful. These characters are trying to deal with their urges, deal with desire, without expressing it to the other party. That is why there are a lot of close moments where things almost happen, but they don't happen. These moments are like the pinnacle of the book, such as the scene where Kei helps Sumire move. Nothing happens there, but Kei feels great emotional satisfaction. And then we have the scene where Sumire sleeps with Miu, but obviously nothing happens there either. It cannot happen. Even though there's some physical contact in the scene, it never comes to fruition, despite their emotional connection. Think of it as a tangent wave in mathematics, or the decay of radiation. Those lines never hit the x-axis, or the y-axis, or whatnot, right? The radiation constantly decreases, but it never fully diminishes. It's always halved. And I would like to point out to the first page of the book that talks about this love and how strong it is. Look how Murakami opens up this novel. In the spring of her 22nd year, Sumire fell in love for the first time in her life. An intense love, a veritable tornado, sweeping across the plains, flattening everything in its path, tossing things up in the air, ripping them to shreds, crushing them to bits. The tornado's intensity doesn't abate for a second as it blasts across the ocean, laying waste to Angkor Wat, incinerating an Indian jungle, tigers and all, transforming itself into a Persian desert sandstorm, burying an exotic fortress city under a sea of sand. In short, a love of truly monumental proportions. The person she fell in love with happened to be 17 years older than Sumire and was married. And I should add, was a woman. This is where it all began and where it all wound up. Almost. How powerful does that love sound like? I think it sounds very powerful indeed. And to connect all these sort of visions and representations of the love, Murakami here uses the imagery of a satellite. This is why he brings in the term Sputnik or Sputnik. And I like to think of it this way about the satellite. First, the satellite is close to Earth, and then it drifts away. Kind of like this image right here that I've just showed you. Though we no longer see the satellite, right? Earth still has a companion in the universe. And that's what Sputnik means. Companion in the universe, or a partner. Though it comes from Earth, Sputnik is made by humans and houses Laika, a dog, inside. It pretty much shows that this is an emotional connection to Earth, right? This object, this sort of machine, this emotional connection to Earth, Earth's creation. If we think of back to the Prometheus myth, right? Right, Earth has created something and now it launched it into the wider world, right? Kind of like the opposite or the continuation of that Prometheus myth. So the satellite goes out into space away from Earth and it disappears. Though we no longer see it, it's still our companion in the universe. First, it was a companion in Earth's orbit, and now it is a companion in the solar system. Murakami develops his story according to this relationship, and this is why the book begins with Sumire meeting Miu. That is when she enters Earth's, let's say, Miu's life. But it's also at the same time when she leaves Earth's orbit. We could kind of paint the Earth as K, right? And Miu could be the moon. So so she is leaving K and she's going closer to the moon, which is Miu. So over time, love causes Sumire to go out of orbit. So she's kind of orbiting around the moon, and then she goes out of orbit and disappears. Like Sputnik, her signal fades from Earth, which is K again, and eventually it disappears out of the side of the moon, which is Miu. Why? Why does it have to be this way? I like to think of it because she crosses the boundary from emotional love to physical love, from fantasy to reality, from a lie that she was feeding herself to a truth that could not be changed. Or, in other words, that she takes her dream and realizes it, and because she realizes this dream through physical contact, things fall apart. Another way we could look at love in this relationship is through the use of a foil. So we could kind of, if you guys know what the literary device of what a foil is, it's kind of like a reflection of the character. So we could kind of take a look at Kei's relationship in the book with the mother of his student as a foil for Sumire's relationship with Miu. His relationship is filled with physical contact, while Sumire's is devoid of any contact at all. Towards the end of the book, this dynamic switches, and he no longer has a sexual relationship, but Sumire and Miu do, like they have a physical relationship. Not to say that Kei realized that his affair was immoral, but because his affair was a result of him not being able to be with Sumire. So he was only sleeping around because he wasn't able to be with Sumire. Okay. So when Sumire left this world, his hope of ever being with her, being in a relationship with her, was extinguished, and the companionship that they shared ended. As Murakami implies in the book, they can only be together in their dreams. So, another thing that this book does well, as I like to think about it, is connecting it with Kerouac's On the Road. And it also explores the same sort of relationship of Sumire and Kei and Miu by contrasting and kind of aligning itself with Kerouac's On the Road. This connection, we first see this connection in like page 7 of the book, so it's very obvious, right? When Miu and Sumire have a conversation, they confuse the term Sputnik for beatnik, and that's where it becomes, that's kind of where the title comes from. Okay. So in Kerouac's On the Road, we see a lot of similar themes to those in Sputnik Sweetheart, that Murakami's novel. I like to think of it as an extension of On the Road in a way, a thematic extension. They both have themes of loneliness, desire, uncertainty of life. And Murakami takes these themes and showcases them through a symbol of the satellite Sputnik, where Kerouac shows it through the car on the open road. Unlike Kerouac, this theme of satellite does not represent spontaneity of adventure, but it is still featured in various parts of the novel. Okay, so we have a satellite versus a car. They both are going somewhere, right? In Kerouac's novel, the car is going across the United States. In Murakami's novel, the satellite is going into outer space, out of connection with the world. So let me talk a little bit more closely about some of these themes. The theme of being lost and lonely. I'll only read one of these connections that I found. But the first thing that I've spotted in the book was Kay calls Sumire a little lost Sputnik when she talks about her love. And in that scene, she says that she is without gravity, that she's spiraling out of place. And I kind of thought it was a great similarity to Kerouac, because Kerouac was painting images of him drowning in the sea, right? He was drowning. So that's kind of like the same gravity-less sort of space, sort of like the same imagery there. And I enjoyed that. In another place, on page 117, Mew tells Kay of how Sumire describes their relationship as two lonely lumps of metal in their own separate orbits, and their hearts briefly crossed paths, and they were in absolute solitude, burned up, and became nothing. So let me read this part on 117. I enjoy the prose here very much, and I thought I'd share it with you. Yes, 117. So this is Mew telling Kay about what Sumire said. And it came to me then that we were wonderful traveling companions, but in the end no more than lonely lumps of metal in their own separate orbits. From far off, they look like beautiful shooting stars, but in reality, they're nothing more than prisons where each of us is locked up alone, going nowhere. When the orbits of the two satellites of ours happen to cross paths, we could be together, maybe even open our hearts to each other. But that's only for the briefest moment. In the next instant, we're in absolute solitude until we burned up and became nothing. So there are two sort of hunks of metal going their separate places. Well, in Kerouac's book, we see two characters, Dean and, I forgot the other character's name, Sal. There we go, Sal Paradise and Dean Moriarty. They're in one hunk of metal going to one place, but yet they don't know why they're going there, or sometimes they're just going for the adventure of it, for the fun of it, and hopefully the life will take them somewhere. Right? Maybe something will happen more memorable that they could write about, or whatnot. All right. So yeah, sort of kind of like in Kerouac's novel, there's a lot of times when we see Sal try to meet up with Moriarty, Dean Moriarty, but he kind of like maybe he can't like spend that time alone with him for a while, and that's like in the first part, and then the following few parts they do spend a lot more time together. And even though Dean is such a bad influence on Sal, and Sal knows about this, even at the first sight of him, Sal's mother's like, don't hang out with this guy. Sal sees like the spontaneity to live in him, that he decides to join him. He wants to know more about him, right? He thinks he's cool, so he wants to be around him. He wants to be in his circle. He wants to, be Dean in a way, right? This sort of companionship, but it's not like a love companionship, right? Unlike here in Murakami's novel. So, as we look at more images of loneliness and being lost, Kay, in one part, he's in Greece, and he describes his life without Sumire as being drained of color. And I like this imagery because we have been told in the very beginning of the novel that Sumire means violet, and violet could be a flower, but violet is also a color, and I guess violet, it was the color that she brought him. She brought like the redness, the reddish tinge to his life, but now there is no color in his life. He is completely gray, and he compares this to being stuck on a desert planet. And a few pages later on, he again talks about loneliness. He talks about what's the point of life? What's the point of living on Earth? Is it to feed human loneliness? He talks about this for a bit. I'll show it to you. It's on 179 real briefly. I'll read the second section here. I turned face up on the slab of stone, gazed at the sky, and thought about all the man-made satellites spinning around the Earth. The horizon was still etched in a faint glow, and the stars began to blink on in the deep wine-colored sky. I gazed among them for the light of a satellite, but it was still too bright out to spot one with a naked eye. The sprinkling of stars looked nailed to the spot, unmoving. I closed my eyes and listened carefully to the descendants of Sputnik. Even now, circling the Earth, gravity, their only tie to the planet, lonely metal souls in the unimpeded darkness of space. They meet, pass each other, and part never to meet again. No words passing between them, no promises to keep. And again, he's trying to emphasize the cycle of loneliness continues as people come in and out of our lives. And the other similarity that I said, Kerouac's On the Road shared with Sputnik Sweetheart here is desire and dreams. That's another theme. We see desires and dreams of all the characters in the novel. Some of them fade away real early in their lives, and some are just emerging. Sumire's dreams are were really to be a novelist, and so she wanted two things: to be a novelist, and then when she met Mew, all she wanted was Mew. So kind of like Sal wanted to write his novel, but then he met Dean, and he wanted to be with Dean. Or like when Dean sees an attractive woman, he wants to be with her, even though he is in a relationship already. He's married to Mary Lou. And we also see Kay's desire to be with Sumire. Right? He has this whole scene where he battles his erection. But unfortunately, yes, he kind of succeeds in sustaining it. Spoiler. But still, he does not end up with Sumire. So yeah, that's a desire and dream right there. And there are quite a few more on that. So towards the end of the book, we know that Sumire disappears, and she leaves a kind of, I guess I don't want to call it a manifesto, but she leaves letters behind, like a work of fiction, work of nonfiction, that she was talking about her life in the same style as Allen Ginsberg and Jack Kerouac would write about, the same sort of writing style. And Sumire comes to a conclusion that living in the dreams is kind of like what drives her. That the best place to be is to be in a dream, because there are no collisions in a dream. And I like to say, I have this quote that I like to compare this to. It's by Ingvar Kamprad, who said that in dreams we do not make any mistakes. When we sleep, we do not make any mistakes. And to live is to make mistakes, to change, to become better than what we've become. And I kind of like to compare it, because I guess this is where Sumire is kind of getting at as well. If she's in her dream world, she's with Mew, and there's no problems there. They could be together in love, and they could reciprocate their love to each other. Okay. But in reality here, they cannot be in love. So we find out that Sumire went to the other side, or at least that's what Kei believes. And he's questioning, how are you supposed to get there? Through death, to suicide? We don't really have an answer. So that's another open-ended part here that we could talk about on 165. So it starts a little bit earlier on the bottom here. The police had made a... I'm going to go all the way down. Sumire went over to the other side. That would explain a lot. Sumire broke through the mirror and journeyed to the other side to meet the other Mew who was there. If Mew on this side rejected her, wouldn't that be the logical thing to do? I dredged up the memory from what she'd written. So what should we do to avoid a collision logically? It's easy. The answer is dreams. Dreaming on and on, entering the world of dreams and never coming out, living there for the rest of time. One question remains, however, a major question. How are you supposed to go there? Put in simple logical terms, it's easy. Through explaining it, though explaining it isn't. I was right back where I started. Alright, so how are you supposed to get there? We don't really know. I guess death. That's my interpretation, but maybe not. And then we see Kei's desire a little bit at the bottom there. He wanted to have Sumire, and he says in one-liner here, the sensation of was far more real than any sex I'd ever had. So that's his desire in a nutshell there. Okay. So that's pretty much my review of the book there. There are quite a few questions about life that need to be answered, and Murakami's trying to answer them. There are quite a few questions about reality and dreams, right? Why don't we just dream forever, right? By sleeping, right? Why are we in reality? Right? Why do we live? Why do we meet people? Why do we need to change, right? That's the complexity of life is what he's driving at here. And if you want to like further explore this, you could, if you want to stick with Murakami books, there are two ways that you could go. I saw these two connections. If you enjoyed the character of Mew, the sort of mysterious past, I like to think of her as Reiko from Norwegian Wood, which is this book right here. Reiko in this book here, she also loses her musical ability and she can no longer play. And then she again questions the meaning of her life. And another way that you could go is IQ 84, which I think is the continuation of this whole story, which is this book right here. What happens there is we have two characters in two separate realities, and the connecting point is the moon, and they kind of they love each other, so they want to get into like this one reality. And I kind of got the hint at the end of the book about this. Right here in the very last part, when they're looking up into the same sky, sure enough, a mold-colored half-moon hangs in the sky. Good. We're both looking at the same moon in the same world. We're connected to reality by the same line. All I had to do is quietly draw it towards me. And kind of like with all the books, I feel like Murakami is exploring either a character or he's exploring an idea, and that gives him more questions, and he could explore more ideas and whatnot as well. In another book, if you want to jump outside of the Murakami universe, if you want to kind of think about what are people, who are we, what does it mean to be me, I, you, all right? This book I read a while ago, it's called A Lousy Sex by Gerald N. Callahan. Here he talks about, I guess, what the meaning of life, what does it mean to be you, what does it mean to think, but there's also one part, if that talks about Sputnik, where he compares Sputnik's operation to launch a satellite into space to his wife's operation after an emergency. And here he says in the book, he kind of compares. He takes off the shroud. He lifts the curtain up from the romanticism of the Sputnik satellite, right? So Murakami has painted a romantic version here, and Callahan painted a romantic version here. But after a few years of writing, and he came back after meeting one of the scientists who worked on the project and told him the truth that Laika's heart rate was crazy high, and she ended up freaking out, and she died in a few hours, right? She was in terror the whole time, and her heart gave out less than 7 hours into her space flight. So it wasn't as romantic, right? Read his account, read Sputnik Sweetheart, and compare the two. I feel like Laika's being over-romanticized, Sputnik is being over-romanticized, because in the end, it's a hunkier, it's a piece of metal in space we don't see anymore. There's a dead dog inside. It's probably still flying in there, but the dog is long been dead. It's 2021. Even if it wasn't 7 hours, we know that this experiment was unethical, and what we done was cruel. All we do is romanticize that as some sort of love thing. So that's another perspective. Right? If you want to look at that, you can. All right, thank you for joining me for this book review. Hopefully I didn't tarry too long. And I'll see you next time for another book review. I'm going to stick around in this Murakami series for a while. I'm going to stick around with the Murakami novels, but I'll pop in and out of them as well. All right, thank you for joining me. Take care, and I'll see you in the next video.